Welcome to Green Connections, where we help you live green, work green, and earn green. I'm Joan Michelson. Find us online on greenconnectionsradio.com, like us on Facebook, and follow me on Twitter at Joan Michelson, and follow us on Twitter at GreenConnectsDC. Today we're welcoming Dave Stangis, who is Vice President Corporate Social Responsibility, a new position at Campbell Soup Company, the venerable soup company. Incredible, 140 years old, I believe, Dave?
Yeah, probably about 145 or 146 by now.
Wow, just astonishing. Dave is truly a leader in sustainability and social responsibility. He has personally created the role for both Intel and Campbell Soup, two of the most iconic and, as we mentioned, long-lived companies in the country and in the world, really. He spent 12 years at Intel, where his last role was Global Director Corporate Responsibility, and he managed to get both Intel and Campbell's into top positions in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index for several years, as well as other top designations. He's also worked for several environmental engineering firms prior to joining Intel, and from boardrooms to assembly plants to kitchens, Dave Stangis has been single-handedly reducing the planet's carbon footprint and been a leading voice on the business case for doing so, which is a very tough argument to make. Dave hails from Michigan. He earned his BS degree from the University of Detroit, and he holds an MBA from the University of Michigan and a Master's of Science in Occupational Environmental Health from Wayne State University in Detroit. He was recently named one of the 100 most influential people in business ethics by Ethisphere magazine. Congratulations, Mr. Stangis, and welcome to Green Connections.
Thanks, Joan. It's good to be here.
Thank you. I was interested to discover that through Campbell Soup Company's iconic soup division alone, $8 billion of the business is selling 2 billion cans of soup per year, which is 60% of the so-called wet soup market and reaches 100 million households per year. Those are incredible numbers. That's a lot of cans. What happens to all those cans?
Well, the one nice thing about the cans is they are infinitely recyclable. Packaging is definitely something that we've set some design goals on. We've set up a goal to take out 100 million pounds of packaging over the next decade, and are actually on track to exceed that goal, or surpass that goal before the time is up.
What is the business case for corporate social responsibility? What are the numbers that you use to sell it in the boardroom and to shareholders?
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation because one of the things I try to do overtly is really not talk about it as, here's corporate social responsibility and here's how much it costs or it can save. It's really how to leverage what I view as consumer trends, world trends around sustainability and the consumer's interest in understanding more about their food and their packaging as a way to drive better business. We've got some pretty strong numbers around water and energy savings and the cost that we've saved. We've saved more than $50 million in costs just on the environmental and sustainability projects alone in the last 4 to 5 years. Most of them stand on their own from a return on invested capital perspective. But then there's the whole other dynamic about employee engagement and more productive workforce and being able to hire and retain the best and the brightest and building a stronger affinity with our consumers and help our customers advance their own sustainability goals. Those are much harder to quantify, but I really try to focus on driving the Campbell business case versus trying to justify CSR as a standalone strategy.
Mm-hmm. You said helping the consumer fulfill their own sustainability goals. What's the research that you have on the consumer really caring about this and making purchase decisions about it? I've seen a variety of different sources of data, but I'm curious what you use and where you see the value proposition is that works within your boardrooms on that issue.
Yeah, it's we probably see a lot of the same data. I think I would say that the latest trend is consumers that are trying to live their values through whatever they buy or use. And one of the things we've seen is in the case of sustainability or corporate citizenship, we still have to compete on cost and convenience and taste first, primarily. But a consumer will almost always, when things are equal, make a purchase decision that supports their values or supports their own personal mission. And that's where our strong work in the community, or our strong work in sustainability is we believe, is starting to create some effect. We still don't communicate a lot directly to consumers about sustainability. We use our corporate social responsibility report and some of our communications on social media, but we're starting to try to infuse it in more and more communications.
Give me an example of how you integrate it into communicating about the products.
Well, I think if you take a look at, like I said, we don't do much in communicating directly to consumers, right, on a sustainability perspective, but we've been doing more and more communications in our CEO messages when Denise Morrison is out speaking, talking about the purpose of the company and what we're trying to drive. We talk to social investors. We talk to a lot of advocates and activists about what we're doing so we can hear their points of view and share our perspectives. And we're doing a little bit more communicating in social media. We're definitely doing more communication on our corporate website. We've redesigned and relaunched the website last year. It has its own corporate responsibility channel. The Campbell career site is integrating a lot of the proof points that we've generated as a way to tell the story. And we're using it in a much stronger way with our customers, the retailers, as we try to help them advance their sustainability strategies.
Do you get any pushback from the retailers on it? Or how do they respond?
No, actually, I think that it's been much more of a collaborative discussion. And not every retailer is ready to take advantage of it yet. But our biggest retailer, Walmart, is always asking us to even do more. They're looking for some of the ways that we're advancing our sustainability strategies to kind of incorporate into their thinking and to make their whole supply chain more sustainable. And we're working with our suppliers as well.
Yes, I noticed that in your sustainability report as well, that you are working with suppliers. Talk about driving the Campbell's supply chain to be more socially responsible and sustainable. I mean, you talked about in the report, obviously, your 2020 destination goals. How were these goals developed, such as cutting the environmental footprint of the product portfolio in half? And how is Campbell's held accountable for meeting these goals? Is it reflected in the compensation structure, for example?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot in that question. Let me see if I can parse it out. The first part was how do we actually kind of work with our suppliers to make our supply chain more sustainable? And that's a big, broad, two-way street. Not only do we do supply chain sustainability scorecarding, we also have multiple meetings at strategic levels with certain suppliers to advance kind of key issues that we might both be working on. I would say the more resilient they are as a supplier, the better we can be as an ultimate customer. On the big destination goals that you addressed, we set those really as part of the launch of the strategy when I joined the company at the end of 2008. So picking the one that you mentioned as an example, cutting the manufacturing footprint of our product portfolio in half, we set the measures as water and greenhouse water use and greenhouse gas emissions per ton of food produced. And we hold ourselves accountable through public reporting in the CSR report. So where we do well and where we are falling short, those will all be published in the report each year.
Are those metrics or any metrics integrated into the performance review and compensation system?
Sure, you're right. So one of the things we've done over the years is found new ways to integrate them into our executive, or I would say manager compensation program. It really is for managers and above. Sustainability is part of the individual performance objective and what we used to call the way we work, and it will evolve as we move, kind of a cultural piece of the performance objective. Also, as part of employee recognition programs, even the top recognition program in the company has a sustainability in the community category. We have a corporate responsibility index that is part of a balanced scorecard in terms of financial and strategic and marketplace objectives. And we measure several things: safety performance inside the company, energy use, greenhouse gas emissions, water use, waste recycling, as well as how Campbell is reflected in certain third-party rankings outside the company. And we create an index of that. and that is factored into the manager compensation and above.
One of the things that I mentioned when we spoke by phone earlier is I have the Good Guide on my phone, and I think one of your products came up when I scanned it with not such great ratings for the health segment, but the others were doing pretty well. Do you use the Good Guide in that index?
No, we don't use the Good Guide in that index. What we do use are a couple different external rankings that focus on how we manage sustainability and how well we disclose what we do. I think you're going to find anyone that takes a look at kind of a nutritional profile, because we have a strategy to provide people choice across the portfolio, from convenience to nutrition to different healthy choices and snacks. You're going to find different products in different places there. Mm-hmm. We have a long-term goal to continue to provide consumers choices that range across the product portfolio. But the Good Guide is a great, interesting tool, and there's a lot of other tools that I've seen pop up over time as well. And I think that's a part of a major trend that is allowing both technology and consumer interest to kind of merge and create this whole new way for consumers to engage with brands and food.
When you say our consumers, what is the profile of your average consumer?
Well, it almost goes back to your introduction. We are in something like 94 or 97% of U.S. households. There really isn't a consumer group that we don't feel is part of our consumer base.
I would think that still the main supermarket shopper is a woman, no?
I'm sure they are. I would agree with you.
So what is the consumer's role in all of this? I mean, consumers drive what you do, right? It's sales driving it, and when you're making these changes, you have to sell it to your market, too, to stay in business. So what is the role for the consumer in all of this, and how do we shift the consumer to making more sustainable, values-driven choices in this direction?
I really do think the consumer is first or central. I think it's central to our strategy. But to your point, I think what we want to be able to do is make the sustainable choice either the easy choice or the invisible choice. You basically want to move everything, continuously move the needle on everything. But whether it's packaging, the way we source our ingredients, the way we're doing things in our supply chain, so that the consumer almost doesn't have to think about the specific product. Oftentimes consumers will say they will, but when it comes down to it, they still buy the food product they like the best. Mm-hmm. So we want it to be the product they like the most, but also have an improved sustainability footprint.
So when you say make the sustainable choice invisible, you mean improving the sustainability of your supply chain so that whatever the customer buys, it is ultimately, if you will, a sustainable choice. It's not something they have to choose between is and isn't.
Right. I mean, the consumers don't like to sacrifice. Nobody.
Right, exactly.
If they have a choice, they won't sacrifice, especially when it comes down to taste and what they feed their family. So, my goal is really to infuse this into the company and continue to move the needle, right? The bar gets higher and higher every year.
So what do you do when the purpose and value proposition collides with the profit proposition? We interviewed Cheryl Kaiser recently, who did the great book Creating Social Value. You acknowledged in the book that you cannot always achieve the CSR goals, for example, the one on improving the nutrition of all of the products, because it wasn't possible from a cost perspective. So how do you finesse that? What do you do and what do you recommend to someone else, perhaps, who is in a large organization who is faced with this inflection point?
Yeah, I mean, the conversation I have either internally or with some of my peers or new people coming into the discipline is that this is really I view it as like a marathon at a sprinter's pace. We're working on things, like I mentioned, from sustainable supply chains in the agricultural space to, improving packaging, sustainability of some of our packaging. Some of those things are going to result in a success before others. It's not always cost-driven. A lot of times, we're willing to take a short-term or make a short-term investment that's going to have long-term payoff. What is tough is to always predict what the consumer will value. For many years, the company was on a sodium reduction journey, But there were times in that journey where certain products got to the point where the consumer said, I'm not buying that product anymore. I don't like the taste of it anymore. So it takes time. If we take our time or we work with our suppliers, are more cost effective than trying to do it on our own. But I think that's more of the main overarching story is, number one, the consumers are, they buy what they want. They can make the choice. We have to work together with the consumers. And, we're a publicly traded company. We need to make sure that we're thinking long-term about our share owners and focusing on that long-term value. And that's really where the sustainability story fits really well.
Well, it's funny you say that, because one of the reasons Dell just went private is because they felt that being a publicly traded company, the market was forcing them to have too short-term a focus. And, and the CEO of Unilever recently said that they weren't going to do the short-term reporting anymore because it impaired their ability to have a long-term focus. So I guess it depends on how you perceive being a publicly traded company.
Well, yeah, I don't disagree with the fact that the market sometimes can generate an attention in the near term. I think unfortunately, that's reality of the publicly traded market. We've been in business for 145 years. I want to be in business for another 145 years and be successful at it. So you can't do everything for the short term. But I think what I need to do as part of my job is help my CEO and CFO communicate the work that we are doing to investors so they understand it, both for the near term and the long term.
Mm-hmm. And that's where I would imagine the investors that are particularly focused on socially responsible investing would be allies or be more open-minded to this as well.
I think so. I often I hold analyst briefings with social investors or sustainable investors that hold Campbell stock and plan to hold it for the long term and are interested in these subjects. So a couple times a year, I'll take my vice president of investor relations and we'll do a little road show or have a meeting discussion with social investors that are interested in sustainability and CSR topics.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of communicating, you talked about in Cheryl's book about the use of language, and I'd like you to expand on that a little bit more because, we live obviously in a communication age, and language matters, how things are presented mattered. You talked about not always giving the messages in terms of, quote, sustainability or environmental messaging, but more about the business case overall. Talk a little bit about the language issue and how you finesse it, if you will, to achieve the goal.
I believe that in general, some of the terminology that we brought on ourselves, sustainable development, sustainability, corporate social responsibility, even philanthropy, don't do us any favors when we're having conversations with our business leaders and our peer executives in HR and supply chain and procurement and finance and marketing. I really do think it is about, understanding the business, leveraging all these trends, the fact that consumers care about the sustainability of their products and they care about the social mission and the social impact the company's having in the community as a way to drive better business. I go out of my way to really understand what is driving the business unit or the organization I'm talking to, number one, and focus on how I can help them in their terms and in their language.
What do you mean?
I'm looking for sustainability or corporate social responsibility to help them do their job better so they don't have to feel like they're choosing between what they normally do and what I'm telling them to do. I think if I can really understand what they're trying to drive, if they're trying to drive, lowered cost or a quicker time to market, how can we use sustainability to deliver those things for them?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So it's like any other marketing, really, which is know your audience and what their goals and agenda are and frame the solutions that you're trying to promote into that value system.
Exactly. And I just think it's kind of core business acumen.
And also in creating social value, I loved the story about Just Peachy. Over the holidays, I did a story on the D.C. Central Kitchen that does food recovery from various markets, farms, and restaurants around the D.C. area. I hear you verbally shaking your head since you're on the phone. And they have terrific success, and they're feeding lots of folks who would not otherwise have nutritious meals on a regular basis. Tell us the story of Just Peachy and what Campbell's is doing to build upon it with other food recovery programs.
Yeah, so, Just Peachy really did come to be not only a great story, but a win-win-win across the board. We were brought an idea a couple years ago by the Food Bank of South Jersey. New Jersey is the number 4 state for growing peaches in the U.S. It's a pretty major peach crop that comes ripe in late July and August. And the Food Bank would do the best it could to give out and donate and kind of get in the hands that could use them peaches that the retailers wouldn't buy. So the local retailers are looking for the best, biggest, most beautiful peaches to put in their stores, and 800,000 pounds of these peaches were getting buried. The farmers, the local farmer co-op, was having to pay about $100,000 to bury the peaches in the landfill. And the food bank hates to see food go to waste. They had the idea of trying to make these peaches into some kind of shelf-stable product. And they considered a bunch of different things, but they thought, maybe they could come up with salsa. But they had no idea. That was about it. That was about the extent of their thought process. They came to meet with us on a kind of a normal review. We meet with all of our nonprofit partners, and they mentioned this to us and really asked if we had any ideas. We took it inside. We have a little pilot plant here at our Campbell headquarters that basically takes recipes that we make in our test kitchens and kind of scales them up to see how they would work in our major plants. Well, they just jumped in. The pilot plant manager, a guy named Pete Imhoff, and his team, and R&D and legal, really thought, maybe we can do this for them. I spoke to our CEO, I spoke to our general counsel, because there'd be a ton of ways to say no to this, but I wanted to get them aligned on the idea that it might be a great thing to do. It's got this great environmental story. It's got this great local food story. It's got this great kind of, hunger issue story. And our employees volunteered. We volunteered the production time. Our suppliers volunteered some of the materials. The first year we did the thing, we made 50,000 jars, and our employees had to hand label every jar.
Wow.
It took, a couple of weeks just to get it all done. But it was a great success. Last year, we did it and kind of rounded up some of the edges, improved it. Local food banks expecting to get about $80,000 of revenue out of this project. So
talk about the revenue stream. You said it's generated a lot of money for your nonprofit partners. You guys are producing it and you're donating the labor and the process, but the funds that are generated, the proceeds that are generated from the sale of the salsa go back to the food bank? Right. So we donate the time, production time, the processing. The food bank pays. They cover the first stage processing. After we're all done and we make it and label it and box it up, we send it over to them. That's it. We're done with it. We don't sell it to them. We give it to them. And then they work with 20 to 30 local outlets, farmers markets, local retailers. They sell it, they do kind of festivals with it, and they sell it in a bunch of different ways and take those proceeds and put them right back into the work of the food bank. Cool. I would imagine you could replicate this with a whole bunch of different produce. Yeah, you would imagine that, and that was our thought too. What we've learned as we've tried to share the story is it's not as easy as we make it sound. What's missing oftentimes is not only just the will, but the expertise, legal, manufacturing, production to design a product and manufacture it in a way that has an FDA-approved formulation, legally approved. We've got all the ingredients, the packaging, the distribution, the logistics, and then an outlet. We make 50,000 jars of Just Peachy salsa. That's a fraction. That's not the kind of volume that a major retail outlet is going to be interested in, because they just don't. That's a little specialty thing, right? They're going to be looking for 500,000 jars to create shelf space for it. Oh, I see. Well, maybe there's ways to do this because food recovery is a terrific win-win-win because there's just, as you say, there's so much food being wasted in this country because of the standards of what it takes to be sold in the market. And then you have people who need these food products that are not getting them.
Yep, no, I agree. I mean, locally our employees are out volunteering in the summers in gleaning events where they're picking some of that produce left in the field and getting it to the local food pantries and the food banks. But it is a national issue that takes a lot of effort across the board. Mm-hmm.
So in closing, you're a really interesting person for many, many reasons, one of which is you've managed to create corporate social responsibility divisions and influential ones with enormous impact in two of the largest companies on the planet. How did you do this? And what surprised you the most in doing so?
I don't know how. I mean, I think it's a little bit of just long-term persistence. Number one is a true belief that business has the power to really do good things. It doesn't come easy. There were, 80 to 120,000 people at Intel when I worked there. There's 20,000 people at Campbell. These things don't happen overnight, but I really do think that, the right people in business, given the right options, make pretty good choices. I don't think they always get all the information they need and have all the kind of options on the table. And that's one of the things I try to do is make these business cases compelling. It's a lot about giving credit where credit is due. I don't deserve credit for these things because I'm not really doing them. I might be, kind of instigating them or initiating them, but it really is at Campbell, it's the 20,000 great employees that are trying to make the world a better place every day when they come to work. It's turning those people on to opportunities and creating a framework and a strategy that ladders up that, helps the company. I'm not an evangelizer. I try to go out of my way to help people do their job better. It's been a lot of fun. It's tough. It takes longer, I think, than I had anticipated early on. It took probably 5 or 6 years to see the traction start moving and getting aligned at Intel. And I've been here about 5 or 6 years, so it's fun to see the traction. But there's also days where you don't win every battle. You don't win every challenge. It's one day at a time.
So what surprised you the most in doing this?
I would say what surprised me the most is when people and organizations do come around, right? I mean, you feel like, maybe they just don't believe it. They're just not interested in it. They don't have the time to pay attention to it. But over time, they do. And once it's their idea and once it's their goal, it really takes off. And it's fun. It's surprising. That's where I would say that's really where the benefit comes, or where I get the enjoyment out of the job.
Well, you obviously, the sharing credit idea comes in handy, right? We make it their idea. This is the art of marketing communications is really making it their idea, and there are some funny sayings around that as well. Well, thank you, Dave. I really appreciate you making the time, and I appreciate what you're doing to single-handedly, frankly, in many ways, help move the business community to a more sustainable place with the support, also, I might add, of the people who brought you in and who gave you the budgets and the latitude and the authority to make these things happen. Thank you for being on Green Connections, and we'll talk to you soon, I hope.
Okay, thanks again, Joan.
Thanks again.
Great to talk to you.
And stay tuned with us. I will give you my commentary on what Dave said in just a moment. Dave Stangis is a particularly remarkable person to talk to because corporate America obviously drives the economy and the supply chains. And so when the corporate sector at that level of a Campbell Soup and an Intel take on the sustainability challenge, it ripples through the entire economy and drives other companies who both compete with them and who use them as a model. Several things I heard Dave say that were really remarkable to me. The business case for social responsibility. Interestingly, he does not talk about it as social responsibility. He talks about world trends and consumer trends. He talks about energy and water. And they've saved $50 million in their water and energy efficiency programs in the last several years, which is a pretty big number, right? So he talks about it in terms of also productivity of the workforce and recruiting opportunities. And even when they're talking to consumers, they look at consumers are trying to live their values, though they obviously, as a consumer product company, still have to compete on cost, taste, and convenience. But they talk to consumers from the point of values and shopping as a values-driven proposition as well as a cost, taste, and convenience issue. Their supply chain is critical, of course. Again, they're driving the economy that way. It's a partnership, which I really liked. And their long-term focus. They hold themselves accountable. I really like this. They're integrated into their compensation program with managers and above, which is key because that trickles it down through the organization. What they have is a scorecard that includes safety, energy, greenhouse gas emissions, water, recycling, and third-party rankings, which I thought was very interesting. The long-term focus and profits versus sustainable goals. I mean, he seems a very long-term focused guy, which is an important lesson for us, both in working with corporate America and in talking about this. As he said, we're on a marathon and we're working at a sprinter's pace. I love that image. Marathon at a sprinter's pace, to me, is the long-term focus, and you go for the next milestone. So you sprint to the next milestone, you put all you can get into the next milestone, and then you have the next milestone. But ultimately, it is a marathon. What he said was, don't make sustainability compete with their day job. Understand what they're trying to drive and use sustainability to help them achieve their goals. Just Peachy is a terrific program, and it reminds me of the story we did, as I mentioned in the interview, on DC Central Kitchen and their food recovery program. I think that this is a program that should be replicated with every produce item that we have in our country because there's always waste like this. I'll close by saying this. He said he holds the true belief that business has the power to do good things. And I agree. I believe that business has the power to do good things, and I would extend that to say business has the responsibility to do good things and use our money in ways that is inherently reflective of corporate social responsibility, giving credit to others, helping people do their jobs better. But ultimately, the true belief that business has the power to do good things is probably the best statement about what corporate social responsibility is about. So thank you for joining us. Tell us what you heard Dave say and questions that you might have for Dave. He'll be on again, I hope, and I'm going to be interviewing his CEO, who's a woman, very exciting, Denise Morrison, who's the first female CEO of Campbell's in their 140-year history. So send it to us at info@greenconnectionsradio.com. Post it on our Facebook page and like us on Facebook, or send it to me through Twitter at Joan Michelson or at Green Connects DC. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.
Capital Audio Post, your one-stop shop for your post-production needs. 703-712-8757.
Our services include video editing, sound design, sound mixing, ISDN recording, and many other media-related services.
Let us finish your project no matter where you are, across the U.S. or across the world. Go to www.capitalaudiopost.com. Call us at 703-712-8757.
Let us know how we can help you finish your production.